Good morning, everyone. It was Pretend Budget Day yesterday. Pretend Budget Day. And, Aaron O'Toole was asked a question, and this is a game that I usually play with Justin Trudeau and the Liberals, right? We don't answer questions we don't like in the Liberals, right? And here's Aaron O'Toole engaging in exactly the same behavior. The question is, what are your thoughts on law enforcement action at various churches or barbecues or anti-lockdown protests? And does he answer the question? You already know. Of course he doesn't answer the question. That's a question he doesn't like, and so he won't answer it. Here we go. Here's the whole clip.
Good morning, Mr. O'Toole. In the last week, we've had a pastor, an Ontario legislator, and numerous other Canadians ticketed for attending anti-lockdown protests across the country. And I'm wondering what your thought is on these actions by law enforcement officials and by provincial governments.
Well, as you know, I think it's important for all Canadians to heed the advice of public health authorities. I mentioned that in my remarks here, Andrew. I think that that's one of the accomplishments that Canadians can be proud of over the last 10, 11 months. Our country has rallied around some of the advice from public health officials, from elected officials, and we must continue to do that. At the same time, I've also said we need to give Canadians even more information. I've been asking the Prime Minister this. I suggested this to Dr. Tam in one of my briefings. We need to allow Canadians to make even smarter decisions. Where are transmissions taking place so that they can guard themselves? We've now practiced distancing, mask usage, hand washing, and other things, which were the early direction in the pandemic. We need to equip and trust Canadians with more information on that transmission point, because that will allow us to keep potentially more economic activity going. That will allow Canadians to be even more prepared to avoid the transmission risk in certain circumstances. And I appreciated that Dr. Tam took my question, my advice, and I would like to see that more common, because I think Canadians need more information, not less.
You know what Canadians need? A politician willing to answer the darn question. What are your thoughts on law enforcement action at the Toronto barbecue or churches or anti-lockdown protests? How about free speech? How about ticketing and fining people for living their lives? How about the enforcement in Calgary for people being at the mall? What are your thoughts on this completely crazy lockdown? How about the infringement on basic human rights that is happening by chapters and Costco? How about all of those things, Mr. O'Toole? Are you going to give me a 10-minute speech about how awesome Dr. Tam is at her job, for goodness sake? Shut up, Mr. O'Toole. What an absolute tool. Ridiculous. Chrystia Freeland, though, on to the financial update, says, today I'm presenting the fall economic statement, our plan to continue to support Canadians through the pandemic and ensure that the post-COVID economy is robust, inclusive, and sustainable. So this is a lot of money that we're going to spend. Record $381 billion deficit during pandemic is affordable due to low interest rate, says Freeland. Yay! This is awkward. They're just awkward. This is ridiculous. This is Freeland looks to take the federal debt to infinity and beyond. That's a Wordic opinion piece. Everybody and their dog had an opinion piece on the federal budget yesterday. CBC News Alert says federal government prepared to inject up to $100 billion to kickstart economy over 3 years once a COVID-19 vaccine is developed and distributed. Again, they're hanging their linchpins here on a COVID-19 vaccine. Hasn't China completely recovered? I saw pictures of Wuhan, China, where everybody was in a pool and they were having a concert and nobody was masked. And this is like back in August. Why are we hanging all our hopes on this vaccine? Number one. Number two, what about people who are not going to take the vaccine? There are a lot of us, despite the fact that they're going to use a hammer and carrot and stick approach. Meaning that they will say, well, it's not mandatory, but if you want to go into like a store, you're going to have to get this thing. Or if you want to have an education or whatever it is, whatever, fill in the blank. I really do feel, and people have said nobody's pushed mandatory vaccines. And while that's true to a certain extent, there has been kind of an implicit implication that the vaccine will be mandatory due to the mandatory masks, despite their lack of efficacy, their lack of actual lowering of transmission, right? Like we're seeing a massive spike in transmission where everywhere that's got all these masks and stuff. Florida doesn't though. That's an interesting thing. Anyway, back to the fiscal update here. We'll stay focused on that, and we'll talk about COVID in a few minutes. CBC's reporting Liberals to spend $100 billion to jolt post-pandemic economy after posting record $381 billion deficit. The Liberal government is preparing to spend $100 billion, blah, blah, blah. In a long-awaited economic statement tabled today, Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland says that the government's immediate priority is to do, quote, whatever it takes to help Canadians and businesses stay safe and solvent. The short term, does that include sending 100-odd riot police to a barbecue that just wants to open his barbecue for people who are comfortable to come to his barbecue to have barbecue? Yeah? No? How about changing their locks? We'll get to that too. Back to this. The short-term stimulus package is valued at $70 billion to $100 billion over roughly 3 years. The government says the stimulus spending intended to build a greener, more inclusive, more innovative, and competitive economy will launch after a vaccine is distributed and life begins to return to normal. I'm pretty sure life is returning to normal in Florida. There's a bunch of places where life is returning to normal and the deaths aren't out of whack. Like aren't not normal, and I'm going to show you that too. When the virus is under control and our economy is ready for new growth, we will deploy an ambitious stimulus package to jumpstart our economy, Freeland said in a statement read in the House of Commons today. So look at these. These are great, right? Oh, look at that. By 25-26, we'll have a $24 billion deficit, which is just under that $40 billion deficit of last year. That's palatable, right? Oh, that $381 billion deficit here, though, that more than halves itself in 1 year. There's no explanation for how they're going to do that, right? And then 121 to 50 billion, again, they're halving the deficit. What are they cutting? What are they planning on cutting? How are they going to stop this spending, right? Where's about half this spending anyway? $200 billion out of the $400-odd billion we've spent. I've seen some people talking about how it's easy to account for about 200 billion of this. 200 billion of it, though, is not easy to account for. So, I mean, Yahtzee, right? How are they doing that, right? It's a lovely graph, but it bears no semblance to reality, okay? None. And the reason this looks small is because it doesn't go back to like 2010. If it went back to 2010, this would be massive and this would be off the charts, okay? You understand? Now we're at a whole new scale, right? Before we used to have positives, okay? Back to the article. In the meantime, the government plans to make investments that would serve as what it calls a down payment on a transformative initiative such as Canada-wide early learning and childcare, job training, and green initiatives. Today's economic statement promises a $1 billion fund to help provinces and territories improve COVID-19 infection control in long-term care facilities. The pandemic exposed deadly gaps in infection control. Sorry, I'm having some work done. So anyway, regardless, today's economic statement promises a $1 billion fund to help provinces and territories improve COVID-19 infection control in long-term care facilities. The pandemic exposed deadly gaps in infection control in nursing and long-term care homes across the country. It's interesting how they can make statements like this without backing it up with data, because the data doesn't back it up. Yes, there's gaps in infection control in the long-term care homes, but they were placing people there. Quebec had people placed there. I had somebody send me how it started, how it's going kind of idea side by side when they placed people, and then the person that was in the article was had passed away, or there had been an outbreak of 20 people in the facility, blah blah blah, and they had to close it down. Very interesting stuff, right? And so when they say the deadly gaps in infection control, maybe we should actually learn from those lessons rather than using them to excuse further lockdowns, right? Back to this. Noting that the pandemic has left many middle-class families struggling, the government is also proposing a temporary support in 2021 of up to $1,200 for each child under 6 for low and middle-income families eligible for Canada Child Benefit, CCB. Freeland said that the government is laying the groundwork for a Canada-wide early learning and childcare system, and that more details will come in next year's federal budget. There's no details in this, right? Like the financial snapshot, the financial update is worthless. It's worthless, right? It's worthless. Back to this. For now, the government is promising $20 million over 5 years, beginning next year, with a $4.3 million annual allotment for a federal secretariat on early learning and childcare that will engage stakeholders and analyze childcare policy. The government is also proposing to spend $70 million over 5 years starting next year, and $15 million million per year to continue the federal Indigenous Early Learning and Child Care Secretariat. I say this both as a working mother and as Minister of Finance. Canada will not be truly competitive until all Canadian women have access to the affordable childcare we need to support our participation in our country's workforce, she said. I've long believed that, what if women want to stay home? What if once you've had your children and you want to raise them and you want to stay home, why is that not viable? Right? Why are we striving to provide childcare? Why aren't we striving to provide support for women who want to stay home and raise their kids? Right? Right? Is it better to have your child raised by the state? I don't know. I don't think so. Right? I think it'd be much better. I stayed home until I was older. I think when I was young in the 80s, it was 5 before you went to school. You didn't go to school when you were before 5, right? And if you didn't turn 5 by the September, you had to wait, I think, right? I felt old when I was going. I remember being done with being at home. But regardless, the age now is much younger, and pushing it even younger to get women into the workforce seems like not great, not a good idea, right? And there's nothing wrong with wanting to stay home and raise your kids. I feel like this has been made into a bad word, or somebody who's a failure or something like that, and it's not at all. There's nothing wrong with staying home and raising kids. There's nothing easy about it either. Kids need to be advocated for. There's lunches to be made, dinners to be made, stability to be maintained, right? I often think of parenting as, I'm going off in a diatribe and I apologize, I'll get back to this in a minute, but I think of parenting as, those mazes in a box, right? You hold the box and you twist the box and the maze moves and the thing goes through. My job is to hold the box steady, to provide a stable environment for my kids to interact and do whatever they're going to do. So I hold the box and make sure that it's safe. And then if they get outside of the box, I push them back in and make sure they're safe until they're ready. And then when they're ready, they go and they go into the real world and they're prepared at that point in time. And they know when they're ready, and I will likely not know, but they'll tell me, right? And that's how parenting works. But when you say, you know what, Mom, you've got to get back into the workforce, man, it just feels like a soft version of the post-apocalyptic hellscape that we've all been force-fed for the last 40 years of movies and television and all that stuff, right? Just automatons going to work. You're all worker bees working for the queen. Okay, back to this. Today's fiscal update projects the deficit will reach $381 billion by the end of March 2021 and could climb even higher. It's worthless. Whatever. Spring 2021. We'll put up another update and we'll get you one by November, guys. Don't worry. They're never going to give us an update again. They're just going to keep spending money and justify it with COVID, right? Oh, when COVID's done, we'll totally get things back on track. Back to this. And could climb even higher depending on factors such as the severity of the shutdowns and the rate of COVID-19 infections. We're doing this to ourselves. The PCR tests are cycled too high. The false positives, they said, Brian Lilly shared a thing, and in the thing it said the false positive rate where somebody has come back and said, I don't actually have COVID, is very low. That's what they're saying. That's why they're saying that there's a low instance of false positives with their tests. It's crazy. It's wild. I should bring that up, but just go check out Brian Lilly's thing. I think it's on page 4. Anyway, regardless, the rate of, so depending on the severity of the shutdowns is done by us. We're doing that to ourselves. We're cutting off our foot. We're cutting off our entire leg at the top part because we've got an ingrown toenail, right? It's just wild. Anyway, that's up. The 381.6 is up from the 343 billion that was projected in the July fiscal snapshot. The government says it's expecting the deficit to decline to $121 billion, less than half in 2021, and to $50 billion, again less than half. That's 70 billion off. What are they cutting in 2023? And to 24.9 billion by 2025-26. How are they doing this? What magic wand are you waving to half your deficit and then half it again and then just half it again one more time? We're just going to keep halving it. Easy. It's no problem. Here's another piece talking about the deficit, the debt, blah, blah, blah. It's all the same. Blacklock's reporter says Finance Canada hikes debt ceiling 56% with borrowing that cannot be repaid in a century. Yeah. Don Martin says, austerity is coming, yelped the NDP after a fiscal update that projected a $381 billion deficit. Kara Freeland, Miss Freeland, says she didn't expect that criticism. No kidding. No kidding. Brian Lilly says, after screwing up pretty much every part of the federal response to COVID-19, Justin Trudeau uses his fiscal update to show that he wants to take over the provinces or maybe become a premier. His big plans are all provincial. Yeah, I mean, as I was reading it, I was like, well, that seems like not their jurisdiction and not stuff that they're supposed to be dealing with. And wouldn't it be nice if they actually dealt with the things that they're supposed to be dealing with in a meaningful way, right? Instead of just like not doing anything about it. It's very frustrating. I mean, you know that. You've been watching the show. It's frustrating. There's nothing to say, but it's frustrating. Trudeau's fiscal update fails the big test, says Brian Lilly. One of the big takeaways from the fiscal update, the government's first glimpse at the federal finances since the pandemic struck, is that Justin Trudeau really wants to lead provincial government. With promises of a national child care program, a national pharmacare program, and national standards for long-term care, this fiscal plan is an all-out assault on provincial jurisdiction. Given Trudeau's record in handling the federal response to the pandemic, the premiers would be wise to send him packing. As I've noted elsewhere, the Trudeau and his government botched dealing with the border in the early days of COVID. They dropped the ball with the emergency stockpile and early warning system, and now they're messing up delivery on vaccines. Ah, yes, continuing to fail forward together, right? Yay! Anthony Fury is saying, and he's been the target of some MP ire. Patty Haydu says his writing is dangerous and misinforming or whatever. But he says Trudeau's economic statement is all about the Great Reset, my latest column, which probably should come with a trigger warning. I think it's funny when you are being funny when you advertise your stuff, right? That's good. Trudeau's economic statement is all about the Great Reset. I'll just get to the part where he starts talking about the Great Reset. I think he's not wrong. Monday's economic statement is in truth consistent with the Great Reset, the supposedly fictitious but simultaneously well-documented agenda to see opportunity in the pandemic to fast-track a progressive agenda with climate change at the fore. After all, why would a document that's supposed to be about seeing us through the pandemic mention the word climate 43 times and green 36 times and have entire sections on green issues? The introduction explains that key to this stimulus plan will be smart, time-limited investments that can act fast and make long-run contribution to our future shared prosperity, quality of life, competitiveness, and our green transformation. But you didn't know that once the lockdowns are lifted, you're about to be thrust into a green transformation. I didn't know that. It continues that these measures will help us grow out of the COVID-19 recession towards an economy that is greener, more innovative, more inclusive, and more resilient. These last three sound good, but it's pretty obvious that Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is more focused on the first. These are not footnotes or sides. These are the bread and butter statements that explain the guiding principles of the Fed's current plans. The following is perhaps the most telling line. When the virus is under control and our economy is ready to absorb it, we will deploy a 3-year stimulus package to jumpstart our recovery worth roughly 3 to 4% of GDP. See, with the virus under control, then the real action starts. It'll do this thing, but fear not. We'll help you pay your rent while your workplace is shuttered. Then, once the carnage is over, we have a plan to remake things. There's been a lot of disingenuous babble gaff about the Great Reset being nothing more than a conspiracy theory, even though there are professions of support of it from mainstream figures far and wide, including on the PM's own website. But I think that what those downplaying it are trying to say is that it's a conspiracy to argue that there's a shadowy cabal of Bond villains behind some curtain directly pulling the strings. What comes to mind when I ponder the Great Reset, though, is exactly what just went down. Our government doesn't see the urgent need to take our damaged economy and return it to the way it was, which many Canadians were perfectly happy with and eager to get back to, but to use this episode as an opportunity to remake the economy in a way consistent with their long-standing ideology. Trudeau said himself back in September, this pandemic has provided an opportunity for a reset. Right, he did, and I think fundamentally this says in a long way, basically, we don't want your Great Reset. We reject your new normal. This is ridiculous and awkward and embarrassing. Stop it. Fundamentally, we reject their plans, right? And I don't know if we're going to see the ability to even do that, right? Thanks, Dominion, right? Thanks for, placing both leaders of the LPC and the LPC. Oh, CPC? Really? The CPC? Yeah. What do you think about free speech? Well, I think some free speech is, yeah, sure. Thanks for the mealy, ridiculous response. Non-answer to the question, right? What are your thoughts? It's very easy. It's very easy to answer a question, right? It takes more, I guess, political experience and acumen to pivot well. But when they're just lying, I mean, what does it matter, right? When they're just playing for the same team anyway, right? Awkward fist bump. Anyway, back to this. Politics and ideology push Freeland to open spending tabs. They've been open since these guys took office without any kind of accountability. Why does this keep jumping up? Anyway, the opposition parties gave little indication Monday. This is HuffPost. I wanted to show you this because it's saying that they're not going to, that the opposition parties are probably going to vote for this. I'm going to show you another piece right after that says the opposite, okay? So the opposition parties gave little indication Monday they'll oppose the legislative measures included in the Liberals' mini budget. Mini budget? It's not a mini budget. Okay. A 237-page statement that identifies a $381 billion deficit outlines an additional $271 billion in spending over the next 5 years and promises another $70 to $100 billion will be spent in unidentified stimulus to help restart the economy when the virus is under control and the threat of lockdowns is past. We're doing the lockdowns to ourselves based on a faulty framework, based on faulty data, based on ridiculous tests. Okay, back to this. In the House of Commons, Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole preferred to focus on what he called the Liberals' incompetence in managing the COVID-19 pandemic and bungling the vaccine rollout. And I mean, yeah, the incompetence, blah, blah, blah. But this fiscal idea is not sustainable, I don't think. How are they more than having the deficit next year? How are they doing that? Please. Just one thing they're cutting. Tell me, please. Opposition parties dismiss the federal government's new economic plan. Okay, so HuffPost says, now they're probably to get us supported, it'll be fine. And 680 News says, the Liberals would need support from at least one opposition party to pass the $25 billion in new spending unveiled in Monday's economic update. Federal opposition parties are already dismissing this plan, hinting they may reject it. This could set the stage for another confidence crisis that could eventually lead to an election. The Trudeau government is promising new spending to help Canadian businesses and workers weather the COVID-19 winter to come. Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland's fall economic update includes a proposal to send extra child benefit payments to families in the new year, as well as bringing the wage subsidy back to 75% of businesses' payroll taxes. The economic update does carry a massive deficit, spending up to $400 billion more than what the government collects in taxes and other revenue. Interesting that this is $400 billion and the other one is $381 billion. That's notable, right? That's a different number. Back to this. Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole is concerned the statement does not explicitly include a plan for vaccine delivery, and without it, there can be no long-term plan for economic recovery. He says the party will likely not support that. The fact that O'Toole is saying that we can't go back to normal until there's a vaccine and there's no rollout, there's no plan for a vaccine. So again, just to underline it even further, O'Toole is on the same team and the same page as Trudeau. And I mean, I know that we knew this. I know that you know this. I'm just telling you. Okay? Again. This is a quote from Aaron O'Toole. As you know, for weeks we've been asking about a plan for vaccines, says O'Toole. That's what our economy needs. Yes, a plan for vaccines. Sure. NDP, we just need it to open up. We just need you guys to open up. Back to this. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh also suggested his party would vote against the update. He says the plan doesn't go far enough when it comes to childcare or pharmacare. Singh also wanted to see more done to tax the richest Canadian companies and individuals. This bill, quote, looks like they're unwilling to make the wealthiest pay their fair share, says Singh, unwilling to go after pandemic profiteering, the excess profits made by large corporations. This is trying to get the definition into the zeitgeist. And you know, I wish Jagmeet Singh would stop being like an open communist. Back to this. The fall update has the Trudeau government proposing millions of dollars in new spending as a down payment and a planned national childcare system that the Liberals say will be outlined in next spring's budget. No details. They're also proposing in their fiscal update to spend $420 million in grants and bursaries to help provinces and territories train and retrain qualified early childhood educators, as well as spending $20 million over 5 years to build childcare secretariat to guide federal policy work. Nope, I don't like any of their plans. All of their plans are terrible. Here's Catherine McKenna, and she says, to tackle climate change and grow a clean economy, our government will plant 2 billion trees. They've been in office for a year. They haven't done anything on that one. Provide grants for home retrofits. There's, somebody said about those retrofits, there's something to read here. I haven't got there yet, but there's a Friends of Science rebuttal that I think is probably worth your time. I'm going to read it. I just haven't got there yet. And the government is going to build zero-emission vehicles and charging stations. Like VW? Like that? Like the Beetle? Like, welcome to the Canada car. Yeah, you can only use it when it's sunny. Like, this seems like a terrible, awful idea. It really doesn't seem like it's going to work. Like, why is Catherine McKenna still acting as if she's the minister for the environment? Okay, so this is death rates per year, right? All-cause death per year listed by province, and then all Canada. And you can see in 2010, we had 234,445. In 2015, we had 264,230. 2018, we had 282,915. The population is continually increasing, so more people are dying, right? You see? And in 2020, excuse me, we had 208,000 people die. 208,880. That's underneath all of the last 10 years. Is that odd to you? Lock yourselves down because you might die. Here's another representation of the same graph, of the same numbers, basically. Brian Lilly was saying that there's been excess deaths this year, and I said there haven't been excess deaths this year. The excess deaths this year have not. That's not accurate. And then Mr. O'Brien replied with this, and I saw this one as well. So, like, these are different representations of the same data or similar data sets, and it's showing clearly that we're in line or low for 2020. So it seems very, why are we rushing to, why are our leaders saying that in order to get our economy back to normal, and this is Christmas, man, people want to go shopping. In order to get our economy back to normal, we have to get a vaccine. But like, that's clearly not true. That's clearly not true. If they know something that we don't, then please, I wish they would tell us. I know that what they know is that they're in bed with China, maybe. Or maybe what they know is if they don't do what they're told, that something might be exposed. Or maybe what they know is something to explain away these numbers, right? Because they're not being genuine with us. They're not telling us the truth. Here's Doug Ford, 680 News is reporting. There's something going on. Either someone isn't being honest or there is incompetence. Maybe both. Doug Ford caught speaking into the mirror about himself. As Doug Ford searches for answers when it comes to the COVID-19 vaccine, his office says the premier spoke with Pfizer and AstraZeneca today. So he's going over the prime minister's head, and he's trying to get access to these vaccines by calling the companies directly. And he's saying that's where he's saying that there's incompetence or somebody's not being honest. I was just making a bad Doug Ford joke. But I honestly, why would anybody believe all of this stuff? Why would I believe that? And from what I've heard about the Pfizer and the Moderna, and not AstraZeneca, but AstraZeneca had a problem with volunteers dropping out of the study because they died or something like that, and then they put out a statement saying that wasn't part of the that they didn't get the vaccine. It wasn't the vaccine that killed them. Blah blah blah. Like, there was all sorts of crazy stuff. There's all sorts of crazy stuff. Why wouldn't I take my chances with this death rate? Why wouldn't I take my chances with this? Why would I trust this man-made thing to go into my arm and save me when it looks like the human immune system is just fine? I don't understand this. I don't understand why we're allowing our leadership to spin this story that is clearly disprovable. I don't get it. Am I wrong? Like, I know I'm not. I know we agree. And I appreciate that when I hear like that I'm not alone. And I really do, because it is difficult to tell in like day to day, right? But it is maddening when the leadership gaslight you on every level, behaving as if this is something that, really needs to be worried about, blah, 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 right? It's just, the data doesn't back it up, right? Like, you can scream and yell and we're all going to die in 2 weeks, we're all going to die, 2 more weeks, just wait, you're all going to die. And when it continues to not happen, and we look at history, because we have history to look at, and we say, man, that seems like a really low total for a pandemic in 2020, doesn't it? We have the ability to do that. We're humans. Why aren't our leaders doing that? That's why I'm so frustrated with people. That's why I'm calling people cowards, because they can look at this just like I can look at this. And if they know something that we don't know, then they should tell us. But if they're just gaslighting the hell out of us, unbelievable, right? Here's a reason why I think maybe they're just gaslighting the heck out of us, right? Excuse my French. The Belgian Minister of Health has just admitted that the closure of shops had no health interest and was decided only to terrorize the population. We're doing this to ourselves. We're cutting off our leg because we have an ingrown baby toenail. Anthony Fury says, one of the most maddening games we've endured right now is politicians in one breath shutting down small businesses with scant justification, and then in the next hangering us about the need for us to do more to support small businesses. You know, I heard people talking about sending donations, and people want to be good people. People want to help out, and they're going to do what they're told. It's unbelievable how obedient people are. They want to help, and they want to be seen as helping and seen as helpful, good people. And it's evil of government to usurp that goodwill and use it to further their games, their psychological games. Here's more cultural destruction. right? Nets need to be put away at community hockey rinks because hockey's not permitted, right? And it's the framework. Quote, since the current provincial public health order clearly states that hockey is not permitted, the recommendation from City of Saskatoon Community Development Center has been that the nets be put away on the rinks for the next 3 weeks to discourage hockey being played, city spokesman Allison Collins told 650 News. Therefore, any kind of organized pickup hockey during designated public skating times will not be permitted on outdoor ice rinks. Please remove any hockey nets from your rink and store them away so they cannot be brought out for use at any time. Hockey is dangerous. How dare you? You can't practice that game of yours. How dare you? Can't sing? You can't dance? No hockey? You aren't allowed to rent out your rink to any groups for any use at this time. The maximum allowable number of participants on the outdoor ice rink at any one time is 30 individuals as per current outdoor gathering restrictions. So you can have 30 individuals up, but you can't have a hockey game? I think that you could do a hockey game with 30 people. Warmington, the only thing missing in this ghost town are tumbleweeds. Many stores and offices are vacant, in desperate need of tenants. The hotels are empty. Restaurants are closed. During this COVID-19 lockdown, there's no hip vibe. There's nothing left. I still come in just in case someone calls, said one longtime specialty retailer. No one calls. The landlord still does. The parking control officers are around too. One nurse treating a patient got nailed after failing to get back to her car in time. There are things that the pandemic does not interfere with. Toronto the good, Toronto the mean, Toronto the empty, Toronto the afraid of contracting COVID-19, but also speaking out about it. Some people in Yorkville said they're nervous to be quoted in the newspaper because they see the pushback that comes with that. People saw 100 cops converge on Adamson's barbecue, which defied lockdown rules last week, and understand what it means. People know it's probably better to not draw attention since Premier Doug Ford has described protesters as yahoos and buffoons. On Monday, Mayor John Tory referred to some at a Forbidden House party as half smart. While they don't call every protester names, they have choice ones for those speaking out against them. One thing we also learned from the Adamson bust is that Dr. Eileen de Villa, Toronto's medical officer of health, not only has the authority to close a business, but also to change the locks. Quote, the medical officer of health has the power to issue a Section 22 order under the Health Protection and Promotion Act without requiring a court to intervene or consent, said Toronto spokesperson Brad Ross. In this case, city staff, Toronto Public Health, with assistance of municipal licensing and standards, followed the medical officer of health's direction and engaged the services of a locksmith to enforce that direction, not the police. Police were only engaged to help keep the peace and assist with the enforcement of this lawful order as required. Yeah, they brought the horses and hired extra officers on paid duty, all to stop a business from serving barbecue brisket. Time will tell who got the COVID-19 response right, but the facts show small businesses is dying in Toronto during the Christmas season, while corporate retailing still thrives. Yorkville, Cumberland, Scotland, Bay, or Scotland? I've never heard of that one. Anyway, Bay, Scotland? I've still never heard of that one. Bay, Yonge, and Bloor are all dark streets at this time when they normally are bustling. Meanwhile, big box stores have no tumbleweeds in their parking lots. If the mayor and premiers went to Yorkville, they won't hear much complaining. There's hardly anybody there. Terrible, right? And so we're all in this together, huh? Some of us have happened to just collect $240,000 a year on top of our pension to pitch in. It's really different in the public sector. Yeah, $20,000 a month to head vaccine distribution for the general who's heading it up in Ontario. We're paying a monthly cost for somebody who's going to distribute a vaccine that does not yet exist and that a lot of people don't want. Whistleblowers accused BC Health Authority of squandering $7 million on the purchase of unusable face masks from China, hundreds of thousands of dollars on unnecessary renovations to its executive offices, and $10,000 on high-end catered meals for executives and their staff. This is remarkably similar to the Los Angeles Times Newsom's secretive billion-dollar mask deal with Chinese automaker sparks bipartisan concerns. So here's what happened. I had to go to Bing to find this. It was not on Google. I don't know how legitimate Channel 411 News is, but they've got this, so it's interesting. In July of this year, Natural News reported how California Governor Gavin Newsom was caught wiring $500 million to Communist China as part of a massive face mask money laundering scheme. Back in April, even the mainstream media was questioning what Newsom was up to when it was revealed that he had wired $500 million to an electric car company in China to supposedly purchase N95 masks for the Wuhan coronavirus. The decision was never voted on or approved by legislators, and when pressed about the details of the deal, Newsom refused to disclose them. Keep in mind mind this $500 million was just the first of 2 installments amounting to a full $1 billion being sent to China to supposedly purchase face masks for Californians. Face masks that never actually arrived, by the way. As of this writing, the Chinese electric car company in question, BYD, still has the money and has yet to send over a single face mask. Now, bombshell information is emerging that indicates Georgia Governor Kemp may be involved in exactly the same scheme. These state officials send huge amounts of money to China under the cover of buying COVID supplies. Then China launders the money into financial kickbacks for the governor's family members or business entities. That's exactly what is being alleged by attorney Lin Wood, and it describes a shocking pattern of communist Chinese infiltration and corruption of U.S. governors. See the full interview posted below. Listen at 6:17 as Lin Wood, who's the attorney, explains. Quote, I believe that Brian Kemp is corrupt, and I think that he was corrupted with Chinese money, and I don't think that he wants this election overthrown and the real results posted, because then Brian Kemp is going to be facing a Trump administration attorney general, and Brian Kemp would find himself in jail. It's that simple. He sold himself out, and now he's trying to hide to get this election validated, even though it's illegal, because if it's invalidated. Hold on. That doesn't make sense. Hold on. Okay. He's trying to hide to get this election validated, even though it's illegal, because it is invalidated, I guess. I'm a defamation lawyer, says Lynn. I stated publicly that Brian Kemp and Raffensperger are corrupt and that they took money from the Chinese on the COVID deal and on the Dominion voting deal. I bet you anything Brian Kemp won't sue me for defamation, because he knows if he did, he'd go to court, I'd have discovery, and I would prove that he did it and that it's true. So I think that that's interesting that they're stating publicly, especially when lawyers are making statements like this. Typically, lawyers don't say things they can't, or they don't think. If they don't believe they can prove it, they don't say it, right? Especially publicly in an interview like that, you would avoid making a public statement that would be defamatory, right? Because then somebody could sue you, and at those levels, people would sue, right? You can't make a statement that is false like that. Rudy Giuliani was playing the same tricks. The same tricks being releasing information saying, like, would I say this if I didn't believe it to be true? And have proof, etc. This is the last little bit for today. 2 stories, one on masks and one on Guelph. And I know I'm a bit long, but not that long. I might hit 40 minutes though. That's all right. Here we go. This Rebel News is reporting, and I thought this was interesting. I asked Guelph the other day who enforces the human rights, the Ontario Human Rights Code. Why can businesses state openly that they're not adhering to the code that's referenced on the Section 22 article, like referenced on the Section 22 public order is an exemption is necessary, has to be made here. So there are stores that are ignoring that. I showed a video yesterday of Chapters. Here's a Rebel News reporter being ejected from a mall because she's not wearing a mask, and she's basically asking the same questions that I was asking, like why are stores allowed to mandate masks? And here's what masks do to you. Okay, this is what masks do to your face. Okay. Why are stores allowed to ignore human rights of Canadians and mandate these things over top of the Ontario Human Rights Code, and they're not being held accountable, but I'm being removed from the store? That's one good question. I asked Cam Guthrie and the City of Guelph. The City of Guelph referred me to the Human Rights Tribunal, basically saying, yeah, like set something up with them, basically. So I did. I sent something in. They responded, which is fine, and I'm in conversation with them. But I think that that's interesting. Cam Guthrie says, "Hey Guelph." The city would impose even stricter restrictions if red level happens. And he's talking about city facilities here, but I'm frustrated about this. This is irresponsible. Lockdowns hurt much more than the virus. We have 1 person in the hospital. Here's the proof of this. 1 person in the hospital. It's taking forever to load because it goes to sleep, I suppose. But I was talking about this yesterday, and somebody responded to me saying that we have 6 people in the hospital, and they cited, when I get to this cases thing, hold on. They cited this screen with 6 in hospital, and they said, see, it can go up really quickly. You don't even know what you're talking about, basically. And I said, click on City of Guelph, right? And when you click on City of Guelph, the data updates, and oh, there you go, right? And fatal cases hasn't changed since July, and we have 1 person in the hospital, and yet we're having the mayor threaten us with further restrictions. If red happens, it's your fault. It's your fault, citizen. How dare you? How dare you? And it's all long-term care homes, right? Long-term care homes once again emerged as COVID-19 hotspots. I'm not going to go through this because I'm already long, but November 30th, right? It's long-term care homes. This is not killing en masse. This is not making people This is not killing. This is not killing more than we've had regular deaths in the last 10 years. I wish that people would understand this. I wish that people would be able to internalize this and live our lives and tell these politicians where to shove their crazy lockdowns and their further restrictions and their looking down their nose and casting blame at their citizens. They should be standing up for their citizens. Cowards. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. Check out SpeakingMoistly.co. I'll be speaking moistly with Greg today. And have a wonderful, wonderful